Welcome back to another episode of Kevinrude's Garage. Today we're going to test run in a barrel 4 boat motors that I worked on over the Thanksgiving holiday. Here's the first guy locked and loaded in the barrel ready to run. This is a 47 or 48 Montgomery Ward 3 horsepower. I got this at the Great Lakes chapter meet at Lockman's Hardware. That was in, I think, February of 2017. But perfect example of how cheap this hobby is to get into. I mean, this motor cost me $25, and yeah, it's not perfect. The tiller handle needs replacing. The side shrouds are missing. But for 25 bucks, it had good compression. And all I did with it is I swapped out coils. It's got the horseshoe style coil, and the coil it came with was bad. So I swapped out the coil, I cleaned the points, I put on a new spark plug wire that you can see here, and I don't know what fitting you're supposed to put on the end of this, but I just got those little circle spark plug wire connectors, or just regular wire connectors. I just use those seem to work fine. So I mean, I was able to put, oh, and I think I put in a different impeller as well, or maybe I just cleaned it, I don't remember. But bottom line is I got this thing going, hopefully here, with parts I had lying around. So I mean, that's a $25 motor that should, last a good long time. So we'll test that one. The other one we're going to test out here is this 1958 Johnson 3 horsepower. I think it's a JW14 was the 58 designation. Yeah, it looks like it says JW14 there. All I did with that is I put in a new impeller. The ignition system in this one was actually good. It had decent coils in it. They'd been replaced at some point. They weren't the ones that are always cracked. So I just cleaned the points on the ignition system. Went through the carburetor. I should say that first motor I showed you, I went through the carburetor on that one too. The one thing you notice on this, as is common unfortunately with a lot of the JWs and a lot of the Kevinrude light twins, is at some point somebody dropped them on their head, and this had this dent here. It was almost a 90-degree dent, and I was able to pop it out that far using the air pressure technique, air pressure and heat. That's why you can see burn marks up around here and back over here. You can see the burn marks, and then that's about as far as I got it, and it started coming out. It stopped coming out any farther, and I didn't want to up the pressure because I didn't want to turn that gas tank into a perfectly round donut. So I think if I end up doing the body work on this one, I'll put a filler in there, buff it out, and repaint it. So we'll see if we get that far. Third one we're going to look at is this 1971 Ted Williams Sears motor, another 3 horse. This one was given to me. A buddy of mine knew I was into this and remembered that he had one of these sitting in his garage and gave it to me. That was probably 2 years ago. And what I did on this one is put in a new impeller, because even though it's an air-cooled engine, it's a water-cooled lower unit, so there is an impeller in it. I had to get a new gas tank for it. The one that came with it was of the Swiss cheese variety, so that wasn't going to work. So bought a tank from a club member. The other thing that's common to these motors is the carrying handle, which is kind of one piece all the way around, often breaks, and this one was no exception. It was broken, so I had a welder do that for me. And I also went through the carburetor, and I don't even think I touched the ignition system. It seemed to be sparking fine, so I didn't touch it. And then the knob on here was missing, so I went to my parts bucket and I found that knob, which obviously doesn't match, but it turns, so that's a good thing. And then, oh yeah, and I did all the fuel lines. Here you can see the fuel line for the external tank, but right inside there's all the fuel lines for the internal tank. There you can see the coupling, that bronze thing out in the hole there. And I also installed an inline fuel filter. First time I've used the inline fuel filter. I got the whole fuel filter kit and clamps for like $20, so I thought that was a decent enough deal. So give that one a go. And then the last one is this guy lying on the ground here. This is a 19 54 Scott Atwater 3.6 horsepower, another free motor. Guy had just advertised it for free up in Lansing. So I drove out there one day and picked it up. He was a motorcycle and bicycle guy and somehow ended up with a boat motor. And he said, hey, if anyone's into these, come and get it. And I think what I did here, and you can see my very neat gasket work there. I replaced the seal gasket, or the seal rather. Well, I guess it's a seal and a gasket. On the lower unit, and you can see I used some kind of non-hardening sealer. Replaced that, and then also went through the carburetor, which you can see up there. Went through the carb, and I also went through the carburetor on the 1971 Sears motor. That's kind of par for the course for any motors. You got to go through the carburetor, and this is that carburetor that everybody hates working on, and it is a little difficult. There's actually a rubber piece in the back of the carburetor that needed replacing. I forget what it's called, but it's just a rubber tube, and the one that was in it was messed up. So the only parts I replaced on that was that rubber tube and then the carb to manifold gasket. So those are the 4 we're going to test run. Let's get started with the Montgomery Ward here first.
Sensitively sailing on a surreal sea, trying to get higher on something